Vi hör nu från Jón Brynjar Birgisson, avdelningschef inom Isländska Röda Korset. His lecture is called Community Engagement During and After Crisis. Jón Brynjar.
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Jón Birgisson and I'm the Director of Operations at the Icelandic Red Cross. What I'm going to talk to you about today is how you interact with people during and after crisis, both in the response phase and also in recovery. Just shortly about the Red Cross at the beginning, we are the largest humanitarian network in the world with 192 national societies, 160,000 branches, which are local avdelingar in our movement, and 14 million volunteers and almost 500,000 staff, which are coordinated by two international organizations, the ICRC, which coordinates our efforts in times of conflict, and the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, which coordinates the Red Cross national societies in larger scale disasters. Shortly about the Icelandic Red Cross, we're almost 100 years old next year, so we're going to have a big celebration then. 29 local branches spread around the island and about 2,000 volunteers. Our programs are both international and the domestic ones are based on three main categories: crisis and disaster, health and well-being, and refugees and migrants. And I'm of course going to focus mainly on the crisis and disaster and health and well-being. Bit of a technical problem. Yes, connection lost. Okay, back in, good. All Red Cross national societies have like a joint strategy for the next decade. We're focusing on 5 global challenges, which of course is the climate change, crisis and disasters, access to health, increased migration, and marginalization within communities. And we do this both globally, nationally, and also locally. The Red Cross movement sees itself as an agent for positive change. We focus on marginalized and vulnerable groups in every society, assist people to assist themselves, and also strive to be a humanitarian force both locally and globally. Let's move over to crisis and disaster. The Icelandic Red Cross has been a part of the civil protection system in Iceland since 1974. In theory, actually, it dates back to 1973, when a huge disaster struck the Westman Islands in the southern part of Iceland, where a volcanic eruption occurred on a January morning, or the January morning of the 23rd of January 1973, and 5,000 people had to be evacuated from that island to several places in Iceland. Hundreds of Red Cross volunteers opened up shelters, mainly in Reykjavik, but also in some other places in Iceland. And what happened next year is that the government made an agreement with the Red Cross that we would be the primary provider of shelter and also take good part in recovery efforts after disasters and other crises. Since then, we've made several agreements with the government that we are the coordinating body of what we call mental health and psychosocial support, krisihjálp. And we also are engaged in beneficiary and community communication, which of course I'm going to mainly focus on today, and also coordination, both in the National Crisis Coordination Center here in Reykjavik and in local emergency operations centers, which are located in every police district in Iceland. And this is also protected in the Civil Protection Act, which dates back to 2008. The Red Cross is obligated to provide staff and volunteers in recovery, mainly in the temporary service centers that are usually opened up in the recovery phase after disasters. We take part in contingency planning And if we would see an incident that would overwhelm the Icelandic capacities, then we would be one of the bodies that would be able to request international assets, search capacity into the island. So if we see, for example, a cruise ship accident or two disasters that would overwhelm our capacities. We do not have that many people, and the Icelandic civil protection system is pretty much held up by volunteer organizations, both the Red Cross and the Icelandic Search and Rescue Organization called ISAR, or Slysavarnafélagið Landsbjörg. I talked a little bit about shelters. Shelters are one of the cores of our operations. Whenever a disaster strikes and people have to be relocated or evacuated, the Red Cross opens up shelters. All of them have the same core facilities, of course, a place to stay, water, some basic needs, some relief assistance like cash at sometimes, but things like communication, concerns, discussions with the evacuees or those who are affected by the disaster is equally as important. The registration is also something that we put a lot of emphasis on. When an evacuation is underway, the civil protection system has to know where everybody is located. So we won't have to send in rescue services into hazardous areas like volcanic eruption areas or avalanches or so on. The Red Cross has operated a helplines for the last 2 decades or so, which is always open. Everybody can access us whenever they feel like it, whether it's Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or whenever, where everybody can both have someone to talk to, someone to listen to, and where we also provide psychological first aid. But in times of crisis, the 1717 helpline is also utilized as a registration hotline as well. Not everybody is able to access the shelters, so they can also call 1717 and get registered. And this, for example, happened just about 2 months ago when several villages in East Iceland had to be partly evacuated because of threats of avalanches, and some avalanches actually occurred. And we had to open up 7 shelters in those areas. But if one would like to go to a neighbor or a friend or family member outside of the hazardous area, they could also do so and just call 1717. So it's a really important factor in our system. But it also is like a low threshold service. If you call 112, you're calling 112 because you need blue light services. But if you're calling 1717, you don't really need a reason. You just simply need to say hi, and you already have someone you can communicate with. I think I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the Red Cross puts a lot of emphasis in mental health. Mental health is the key in all of our services, and what we call psychosocial support. The Red Cross has response teams in all police districts in Iceland. We are the coordinating body of psychosocial support in the system, where we not only coordinate Red Cross operations, but also health services, municipalities, police, rescue services, and religious organizations like the National Church of Iceland. This is done in the MHPSS coordination groups that I've listed up here. So let's go over to communication. This pretty strange picture you see now is an image from the European Centre for Disease Control, ECDC, from an incident that occurred in Iceland in 2017. There was a norovirus outbreak in a scout camp in Úlfljótsvatn, which is a scout camp in South Iceland. And about 90 youngsters got infected, and about 200 had to be quarantined. This was in the middle of the summer. The rescue services were not completely activated, and there were some confusions, and things did not all go according to plan. And this, of course, put some strains on many and confusions with those affected. So in the aftermath, the ECDC decided to make an inquiry, an investigation actually, on how the Icelandic civil protection system did manage this event. And as you can see, things, actors like police, health services, they're tiny in this map. The biggest ones are actually the scouts themselves, the Red Cross, and you can see the mayor in Hveragerði. So some people stepped up, some people were able to give answers, but not the people and the actors that need to do so according to all our plans. But this was so we learned a lot from this, and it was a good factor in our plan for something that was just around the corner, the pandemic. Let's go. Let's keep on with cooperation with those response actors. The responders, the first responders especially, have sort of tunnel vision. The fire brigades focus on the fire trucks, the fire engine hoses and stuff, and the police on, of course, what they are doing. So sometimes when the media approaches the first responders, they are quite focused on what they're doing. So if you ask the police commissioner, okay, what is happening in this incident? Yeah, we have 10 police officers working and we've closed off the perimeter. Talk to the fire chief, something like what I said before. We have 20 firemen fighting that fire. But this is not something that the general public wants to know. There is something happening. We need to know, how does it affect me? How can I cope? How can I mitigate something happening to me and my family? So we need to have something that focuses on the general event, but not these specific aspects of the response as like police and fire do have. So this is what the civil protection system is supposed to do, and the Red Cross as part of it. Information, as I already mentioned, is part of relief. It's just as important as providing people with food and shelter and accommodation and other necessities, because it's vital for the public. Your daily routine does not function as it normally does, and you've been evacuated or something is happening to you and your family, or if something hasn't happened and you might expect something, then all sorts of rumors start spreading around. So all responders and those engaged in the event need to talk and speak very clearly, and also listen to people. Of course, it should never be like a one-line discussion like I'm having with you now. It should also always be a collaboration. Concerns must be addressed. People may have all sorts of concerns. They may be afraid. They may be worried, okay, what might happen. And we should never underestimate that. We have seen too many times that police commissioners or someone in charge comes on the media and says, okay, nobody in this village is afraid. We are used to everything. We're all sailors. We can deal with everything. And then, of course, some people think, okay, then I'm not supposed to feel this way like I'm feeling now. And so we should always respect people's feelings and concerns and worries. And we should have both formal and, of course, informal as well, channels for complaints and concerns. This may be done in like open gatherings. This may be done in websites, social media, also open houses, all sorts of means. But in the recent years, we have also focused a lot on the civil society, because the civil society is there before the incident happens and afterwards as well. when I'm talking about civil society, I'm talking about women's clubs, the church choir, the sports association. So if we talk through these means as well, we get more ears that listen to us and believe us. I shortly mentioned temporary service centers before in my introduction. This is something that has always been around, like in the Westman Islands eruption, a service center was established in Reykjavik when the Westman Islanders had been evacuated in a house called Hafnarbúðir at the Reykjavik Harbor. But in 2008, this was put into legislation that the civil protection is actually obligated to open up a temporary service center that actually works as a link between the response and the recovery, and also means for communication. Because, as I've mentioned so many times, effective recovery is based on involvement by the community, by each and everyone. So the temporary service centers are open to the public. Everybody can come. It's a low threshold, assistance, and also, and the services provided in the service centers may vary from one event to another. Like if it affects a farm community, then we bring in experts and discussions about farming, and if it's in a fishing village, the same. So there is no like one line how we run a temporary service center in the recovery phase after incidents, but these are vital and have proven to be excellent. And like in the evacuation in East Iceland earlier this spring, we opened up temporary service center both in a village called Seyðisfjörður and also Neskupstaður. Those were the villages in East Iceland that were most affected by this event. It was an easier run in Seyðisfjörður because they had recently gone through another incident when a flash flood or mudslide affected the whole town just a few years earlier in 2020. And so they were used to this facility. They knew what to expect, while we had to put more efforts into introducing these services to the people in Neskupstaður, because they haven't had a disaster since the year I was born, in 1974. Important factors for successful recovery is, like I've stressed so many times, community involvement. If we put effort into community involvement, an open community, a diverse community, before something happens, it will be much easier for the community to recover after an incident. But of course, communities change. We get migrants that are far away from their normal support mechanisms. There might be some changes in the economic state of that community, unemployment, all sorts of factors that may weaken the resilience of the community. So this has to be addressed in peacetime before something horrible happens, so everybody can make it easier for the community to recover. If a community is weak before the event happens, it would have a lot more impact than if the community is resilient prior to the event. And we do this with different means. Vulnerability and capacity assessment may look like something high level done by universities, but the Red Cross is doing that in every community in Iceland. We have open meetings, we talk to everybody, the mayors, the clubs, the sports clubs, the children, and our local branches. Okay, where are you strong? Let's strengthen that. Where are you weak? Let's focus on that. And which are the hazards in your community? So let's be ready for them. This is like a communal approach to preparedness and also mitigation. And in the next year, we will do a lot more of that. And my slides froze, but I only had one left. So I'd like to thank you very much and It's been a pleasure being with you today.